So I feel very inspired to talk about the title today. So many teachers are quitting non-duality. Should I? So if you watch a lot of non-duality on YouTube, you might have noticed there's lots of teachers recently saying why I quitted non-duality, or why I'm quitting speaking about non-duality, why I don't speak about non-duality anymore. Yeah, and I feel like non-duality is becoming a bit of the dirt word in spirituality. I could be wrong. It's only from my observation of the YouTube algorithms, and maybe everybody else gets really different algorithms to me. But yeah, there's a perception of negativity towards non-duality, and I feel like it's been building for quite some years now. Like this idea that non-duality is spiritually bypassing. Yeah, and I think that you all know how passionate I am about speaking and teaching, if that is such a thing, if you can teach non-duality, but speaking about non-duality. Like, to me, it saved my life. It radically changed my life. And I feel eternally, not internally, eternally grateful for that. Like, it really radically changed my life in an instant. Even though there was a build up to it, the last bit was an instant. And yeah, I've said many times in videos before that I feel like my life would have been quite difficult if I hadn't got into this subject. But I understand why it's getting such a bad rep for many reasons. Firstly, because I mean, it's kind of saying that if you are in the present moment and not going off into thoughts and not going off into ideas of yourself, then there is no problem. And that's fundamentally offensive to the human race and to even a lot of spiritual traditions or teachers, because it's denying the existence of the thought realm being real in any way, and the person being real, and that the person can or will become enlightened. I can understand why that creates problems, because if it's not really understood and it's not really this energetic movement into what Nisargadatta would call the witnessing mode, the supreme witnessing mode, I'm not exactly sure how he would phrase it, but something like that, or what I would call like this expansion or the empty looking. If there's not the movement to that, and non-duality is taken mentally, then I can see why it can be considered dangerous or problematic. Like, yeah, because some people might be using it as a story to tell themselves and a way to deny feelings and emotions by telling themselves there's nobody here, and trying their best to put their attention in the present moment. Some people might even name or categorize that as depersonalization. Whereas I don't really feel it's like that, and it wasn't like that for me. Maybe there was a period of it being like that for me, but there was a going past that. Yeah. So a lot of teachers now feel the appropriate thing to do is to teach therapy and non-duality simultaneously. And I think that that's brilliant. That's great to teach non-duality therapy and self-improvement all different types of techniques to help the person and speak about non-duality. I'm not against that in any way. However, I feel like if all teachers do that, then the beauty and the magic of just talking about non-duality will be lost, because I feel what happens when you just stay close to speaking about non-duality, maybe there's a bit of movement onto the personal realm. It's like inevitable when you do question answers. If you just stay there, then what's missed is this, I mean, what they would traditionally call transmission, but I'm always reluctant to use those types of words, because who would be transmitting to who? So if there is a sticking to non-duality, I feel like it's like this deep meditation that can happen in the talks, but it's not appropriate for everyone. And I really understand it's never going to be popular. Yeah, I've been doing this 12 years now, and I've watched many teachers become popular, and it's very rare that they're just speaking pure sort of more about non-duality. They're normally mixing with other things, because yeah, it's not very popular to just speak about it. You learn the concepts really quickly. So, you know, in maybe under a year, you're like, okay, I'm done. I've learned everything Lisa's got to say, or I learned everything Nisargadatta. I've done. I mastered it. And then the mind thinks that's what it is. But that's actually not the beauty of having satsang and speaking about non-duality. The beauty is the energetic resonance that can happen, that's beyond the mind, that's beyond intellectual knowing, that's much, much deeper. It's the calling into the witnessing consciousness. I think this is what Maharaj would call it. I'm so affected by him at the moment because I do his book in the book clubs, and yeah. But I would have called it to beingness, or the empty looking, or impersonal I amness. It doesn't really matter. And you'll see teachers of non-duality change their wording, which I can imagine also frustrates the listener, because you're like, oh, I've just got it, and now they're changing it, or they're being inauthentic. But it's because there is no way to speak about this subject. There's no one way. Obviously, there is limits, like you can't just talk about eating a packet of crisps. But it's predominantly about this energetic resonance that happens. And you'll have energetic resonance with different teachers, you know, nothing personal. There'll be some teachers that affect you in that way, and some teachers that don't. And I feel like, you know, the teachers that are quitting non-duality or stopping talking about it, there isn't the appreciation of this and the power of this. Like, you know, it's not spoken about enough. Maybe it's spoken about more in India, where it's like these transmissions or meeting in truth is more appreciated. I don't know, maybe it's going out of fashion there. Yes, that's one reason why I feel like non-duality is becoming unpopular, is because people think it is something that you understand, and so they kind of listen for a year and then think they've got it. And that's not what these talks are about. I've been repeating the same thing for 12 years. I've not got anything new to teach you. It's just us meeting in this space of silence every week. What beauty. And it's nobody's silence. It's not mine or your silence. It's the one silence. Just God is animating this body to be the speaker. So that is that. And all the appreciation, the bypassing that can happen. And I understand that as well. So with the bypassing, a lot of people feel that, just pointing to the present moment is a bypassing of emotions. And it's not really meant to be a bypassing of emotions, although I can understand that that can happen. And if that happens, that can seemingly be damaging for somebody. But it's actually meant to be a real embracing of emotions. I feel like it's a really misunderstood area, because if there is real presence, then there is nothing to avoid. So if there's emotions here or feelings here, then they're kind of really experienced. They're not sort of pushed away. It's not someone trying to push them away. But I can understand why that opinion occurs, and I'm sure all of you listening know there's been periods in your spiritual search where you've been spiritually bypassing. I think another reason why non-duality is getting a bad name, or has got a bad name, is because of seemingly immoral actions of the teacher. So if you give one teacher so much power, then the immoral actions that take place. So if all the students believe that I am God speaking, or if they believe, that other teachers are God speaking, then it gives that teacher an incredible amount of power. And with power comes danger. Yes, and I've learned that the hard way, when I first started speaking, I have to confess, I didn't understand the power that I had over people that came to the talks. It wasn't on my radar. I wasn't looking for power. What happens to me when I speak about non-duality is I become incredibly blissed out, often, not all the time, but most of the time I become very blissed out. And my teacher, Roger Castillo, is one of his main teachings is, in every given moment, do exactly what you feel like doing, knowing there's no doer doing anything. So because there's such conditioning here, this body navigates itself, not all the time, it's not always possible to navigate itself towards joy or freedom, but it's looking for that. And in the expression of non-duality, it's incredibly blissful, not actually joyful. That can come and go, blissful. It's like bliss. So it's like following the bliss. So that's why there is remained a speaking about it, because it's very blissful to do it, and that feels like the right way to navigate. Like the body is looking and following that. It feels like God's will. It feels like I'm not in the way, the character or the old seeking energies or old karmas aren't getting in the way. It feels like the right thing to do. So that's why I continue to talk about non-duality week after week after week after week, the year after year after year, because that feels right. Body moves towards that. However, I had no perception really, which is really very ignorant. That I was very young when I started speaking, that contained such power over people, because to me, I wasn't looking at it through power or not power, or that the other people giving me power or having less power than me. they may have been doing that, but I wasn't looking at that. You know, I was looking at the emptiness and the stillness and the resonance. Yeah, and so in the beginning there was accidental misuse of power here, I would say. But in the end, that is God's will. And also that hurt me as well. Like I often not put myself down, but don't stand up for myself in certain situations. But that also damaged me, not realizing the power I held over people, because I also, didn't realize that when you're seemingly having power, other people want to get that power or have some of that power. So I didn't, so it also made me a little bit of a unknowing sitting duck, like whack whack, bobbing along on the surface, like whack whack, here I am. Yeah. Yeah. So it's always two-way in a way, in the one-way system of things. Like it was through my ignorance, there was a damaging of people, but then also damaging of this body-mind mechanism as well. But it really can't damage things, because when we look at it in the correct light, even though I've described it as that, because that's how to communicate, but in the correct way of seeing things, that was life eradicating any false beliefs or ideas that were left in this body, or any karmas left in this body, and energetically opening up more and more. Everything that happens is always that. It's always expanding us. Yes, there's that. And so because of this misuse of power of teachers, this cults that are formed, this has also damaged non-duality as well. Yeah, and we all know why that is. Yeah. And we all know what happens there. And then another thing that makes non-duality not popular is it's weird for outsiders to come into. They're like, why is this woman or man or non-binary person opening themselves up to questions and sort of putting themselves as if they know something that other people don't? So if you come into non-duality, it's such a weird thing. This person sitting at the front talking about absolute reality. It's like, why does that person know? Who do they think they are? And it's a weird thing. Luckily for me, I found it weird when I first came across it, but also fascinating. And my first satsang was John de Ruyter, and he didn't say a thing the whole satsang, just was looking in people's eyes, giving them the non-dual eyes. I suppose it's darshan in India. And I was already doing the Buddhist stuff, so there was some understanding of something. But I was just like, what the hell? There's like hundreds of people here, all sitting silently, watching a man stare into somebody's eyes for hours on end, for a whole day. What is that? Luckily, I kept going back. But these are all reasons why non-duality in 2024 is becoming super unpopular. It's I think seen as dogmatic, old school, boring. We know all the information out there. And then the sadness is meditation, which happens, this meeting in truth is not appreciated for what it is. Yeah. So just then I went to say something, and then there was a stopping. And that's because I'm trying to follow the energy. And then I went to speak, and then I could feel the energy needed a moment of silence. That sounds so weird. I mean, this is why people don't come to non-duality, but it's like, it's like, it's not even me doing it. It's just the energy is trying to follow the right energy. That sounds so crazy. Yeah. So should I quit non-duality? That is the question. And in the end, it's God's will, whether quitting happens or not. But I suspect it's unlikely because it's just repetitively year after year. It's so blissful doing it. Yeah, speaking about non-duality with others that are open to it is incredibly blissful. It's not blissful doing it to people that aren't open to it, because I see it as this like two-way thing. It's like a love affair that's happening, but it's like one energy's love affair. So if the other is open to it, then this like, energy circulates. But if the other isn't open to it, then it's totally not interesting to speak. What interests me about this energy, and um, yeah, this is going a bit off course, but it feels to speak about it, is what interests me about this energy. So what it feels like here is that like, there is presence, there is a live presence, there is this empty looking, which is no thing and everything. And that empty presence, like, it gives like a feeling of aliveness, of love. And what it wants is for action, behavior, speaking to be in line with it. That sounds really weird. And I think it's what people call, like being in flow in other spiritual traditions or other teachers. It's not named so much as like that in Nonduality. And like Ananda Mahima, I think she would say like God speaking. It's like God wants to speak through the instruments. And when, for this body, when it's in line with it, and it feels very blissful. This body is not always in line with it. Like this body is still expanding and adapting and changing to this realization. And it's hard living in a society that really doesn't understand this. Yeah. But what it wants is to follow that energy, like to follow the bliss. And that is really scary. Like this character sometimes gets afraid as well because it's not necessarily logical. It can have logic in it, can come up through logic. Yeah. In the end, everything is God's will, even when it doesn't feel like God's will. And that's what has to penetrate the thinking mind more and more to relax the system. But ultimately, I feel like goal is to be as in line with God as you can be, as surrendered to God's will as you can be. And what's interesting is maybe a lot of people that are here know this from childhood. Like this was always my mission, even in childhood, but I didn't really know it. And maybe a lot of people can resonate with that. I think there's a lot of artists and creative people and sensitive people that my goal, even as an artist, was to, like when I was younger, I used to act. And when I acted, and I don't know where I got this from, but this is why I loved acting, was that when I did it, I had to totally follow the moment. So I would learn the words of the character. And then when I went to perform it, there was no thinking allowed. It had to come out spontaneously. And I was so strict on that. And I think that other people maybe weren't all doing the same, but that was my philosophy, was I had to do that. And I think some teachers suggest that there's like the method in the Stanislavski, the method and Alexander techniques. So there's all these different techniques that suggest it in acting, but this was really important to me. And I don't know why. I didn't know why. I didn't even think about it or question it. And I didn't realize that other people might not be doing the same, that they might be thinking or constructing things. And I remember this one play that I was in, where I was the main character. It was in Clockwork Orange, and the main character was a man, but I was cast as an androgynous character. At that time, I had like really short hair, and when I don't wear makeup, I can look very boy-like. I used to when I was younger. And yeah, I was cast, and it was really complex because sorry, Lisa I had to do lots of speaking, and also some of the other actors weren't that great. It was like at college, and so what I did was I learned every role off by heart. So it was automatic. So I knew the whole play from beginning to end, like every word in it. And then I learned everybody's movements in it. So it was done in the round, and I learned everybody's movements because I realized that I couldn't rely on the others to not get it wrong. So I had to know everything. Because it was in the round and I was always on stage. It was like I was always in every scene. If you ever read the play, it was really intense and it was really physical theatre as well, the way the director directed it. And then when I did it, I wasn't allowed to think. I only allowed to do it on automatic. It's like I taught my body how to do it, and then in the moment it was only allowed to come out spontaneously, and we could call that automatic, but it's like the spontaneity. It's like I was only allowed to be really present, and then it to come out of nowhere. And we call that automatically, like a guitarist is playing the guitar, for many years, learned it, and then just spontaneously plays. That's it's kind of like we call it automatic or something, but it's like spontaneity in a way. It's coming from nowhere. And it felt like love when I did it. This is why I was so in love with the subject. And it's because these had totally vanished and there was just presence expressing itself. And this was all I was really interested in acting, and everything that I ever did in my life, it was about recreating that. I even remember at university writing an essay spontaneously about how essays and every piece of art should only be done spontaneously. I see the problem with it now, like I needed to learn better how to write a essay before I spontaneously did it. But I understand now the premise of what I was coming from and this energy. And it's the same with writing, this spontaneity and this importance of spontaneity. But I understand now that body can learn things and that's spontaneous, and then it creates spontaneously. But what I'm trying to describe is this speaking from no place. Not speaking from a derived place, from a thought-based place, where you're once removed in your imagination, you're kind of imagining yourself speaking. You've got a character and a form in which you want to present in a certain way. It's just coming out. And in that coming out, it might be that the character is presenting in a certain way, but it's nobody presenting in a certain way. It's a happening. Like our bodies all know how to eat. If we'd never not done this action with our fork and with our spoon many times, we'd have to practice doing it. But our bodies have done it so many times that they can just be allowing that to happen, and an immense presence to it. There doesn't need to be any second. Yeah, and I know there can be contradictions to that, because there can be immense presence in practicing eating. And just trying to describe that. And when you become really present to it, like the body wants to move in certain ways, wants to do things and say things in certain ways. And that can seem super mad to another person and super unethical or unlogical. But it's actually coming from love. And this is where non-duality gets the bad name, because people who aren't coming from presence or love and use it as an excuse.